Thank you all for being present in today's morning session. Now, Professor Dr. Shamsad Mortuza will commence today's sessions with his plenary session titled The Specter of Naxalgia in Meghnadbodh Rohoshyo. Professor Shamsad Mortuza is the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh. He is also the Chair of Department of English and Humanities. He has over 22 years of teaching experience. He is a professor on leave at the English Department, University of Dhaka. Prior to joining ULAB, he has taught at many universities, including his alma mater, Jahangirnagar University, where he was the chair of the Department of English between 2005 and 2008. As a Fulbright scholar, he pursued his second MA in American Indian Studies at the University of Arizona. For his PhD, he attended Birkbeck College, University of London. His doctoral dissertation, The Figure of the Shaman in Contemporary British Poetry, was published by Cambridge Scholars Publishers in 2013. He also completed his CELTA from St. Giles College, London. In 2013, he received a Fulbright scholarship for the second time to go to UCLA as a senior visiting postdoctoral fellow to conduct research on occultism. He has published numerous articles and book chapters in reputed national and international journals. And as we call it, probably the most proactive pro-VC of our times, I can pleased to call Dr. Shamsad Mortuza on the stage. Thank you.
So this is what happens when you have a very cute convener. You cannot say no to Zayed. So he almost extracted an abstract out of me. Okay, and I was not supposed to present. So he just said we're still waiting. So when the brochure was halfway in press, he said I'm still waiting for your title. So I ended up giving a title. And then he said that we'll not be needing your abstract, so we just need your message at this point. So I wrote the message, and then he said at 11 p.m., so maybe on Monday, was it? Yeah, Monday or Tuesday. So he said that we need your abstract. Okay, so I have no clue what I am getting into, but I will give it a try, because this is a movie that I really enjoy, and I would like to share my thoughts basically on a movie that I recently watched on Netflix. Okay, right, let's see. Okay. Full screen. Great. Okay, so as the title, I have slightly changed the title, so I'm just calling it Naxalgia and Meghnadbodh Rohoshyo. Okay, so how many of you have actually watched the movie? Can I see hands? Is there anyone who has? Okay, that makes my life easier. Alright, so the way I have designed my talk, so I'm going to talk first about the movie, and then I'm going to talk about the movement that is known as the Naxalite movement. Alright, so I'm going to read out, so bear with me. So the title of Anik Datta's 2017 movie, Meghnadbodh Rohoshyo, uses the deconstructive tool of under-erasure to cross out Kabbo in order to replace it with Rohoshyo. Derrida used this technique of Heidegger to write over words that are, quote, inadequate yet necessary, unquote. The title, as a signifier, therefore illustrates the inadequacy of narrative, that is Kabbo or epic, as a trope with reference to Michael Madhusudhan Dutt's poem, and supplants it with the genre of mystery novel. Now, epic by design is a high art that celebrates the action of a hero with certain moral attributes. Inspired by Milton's Paradise Lost, where Satan is portrayed sympathetically, Dutt's hero Meghnad is the son of Ravana, who was killed unceremoniously by Rama's brother Lakshman, and Meghnad's uncle Bibhishan betrayed against his own tribe, so which allowed Lakshman to find Meghnad unarmed and off guard. Now the unheroic murder is central to one sacred narrative. By crossing out Kabba, Anikdatta engages with his namesake, a Dutt of the past, to locate the narrative in a popular discourse. Now the subtitle, as you can see at the bottom here, so this idea of the who done it, how done it, why done it, prepares us for a volley of questions that the audience are expected to encounter in the course of the film. Now the background of the movie, which is nothing short of Lonkakanda, involves the Naxalite movement that became prominent in certain parts of India during the late 1960s and early 1970s. The movie acquires an international dimension as one of the members associated with Naxalism returns to Kolkata from the UK, where he established as an award-winning writer. As the story unfolds, we realize that this man has a secret, which hangs like an albatross around his neck. Okay, so here I'm going to be a bit more experimental. Okay. Now the story employs frame narrative and begins with yet another revolutionary moment. Okay, so let me share the movie since you have not watched the movie. So So this story employs frame narrative and begins with yet another revolutionary moment. So on the movie screen, we just saw a police raid killing a Swadeshi activist at Birbhum in 1936. Now then the frame shifts to Oxford, set in 2016, where an envelope is opened by a man and Madhusudan Dutt's Meghnadbodh Rohoshyo is brought out. The next frame shifts to a contemporary dance drama based on Meghnadbodh, performed by Gautam Haldar. Now in a play within a play, present time is transported to mythic time. Key passages are chosen. The epic invocation tells the audience that they are going to enter a Madhu Chakra. The first reference is to romantic notion of a poet as a bee that gathers nectar from different sources to produce its honey. The pun, however, turns Madhu Chakra into the circle of Madhusudhan's Urdhva that we are about to enter. Now, after the interlude, the narrative frame takes us to Oxford Bookstore in Park Street, Kolkata in December 2016, where a book launch is being held. All right, so let's go here. And okay. So this Madhu Chakra and the excerpts that I have not shown, so this idea of when Vibhishan is so has allowed Lakshman to enter and Meghnadbodh is trapped, and the key idea that we get to hear is that so you are a shame to the warrior tribe. So that is going to be the key feature of this movie, of course. All right, so then what happens that we are told, so the plot moves to Park Street, Kolkata, so where we are introduced to a sci-fi writer, Shamsad Mortuza, and we have already seen the name on the envelope in the second frame. So the author of the Big Bang Theory, and he's the recipient of Arthur C. Clarke Award. The parody of Stephen Hawking's title is further expanded when we hear Newton's second law of motion being parodied to comment on Bengali sentiment. So the second law, as you remember, every bomb continues its state of rest or uniform motion unless compelled by some external force to act otherwise. All right, so sthir vastu sthir. So that second law of motion, so there is this parody of it. So I think the state has come twice. So this is where we encounter Shamsad Mortuza, and so this is book launch going on. So this part is read out by the translator, Elena Majumdar. Okay. Now, by comparing Bengalis with inanimate matters who require external force for movement, we recognize the textual possibility of movement. Then again, during the question and answer session, we are reminded that the sci-fi writer known as Asimov during his student days, so he used to be called Asimov when he was a student at Presidency College, and in the audience there was his old-time comrade Shirajul Islam. So he came up and he asked a very difficult question which he was not expecting. So he basically asked that, okay, so you're writing science fiction located in 2050, your previous novel was set in 1950s, okay, so how come you are missing out 1970s, the time when you were growing up, right? And in his defense, so Asimov Bush, so he said that it's more important for him to bring out the unlived experience. So he's not interested in the lived experience. Rather than as a writer, it is his challenge to imagine the unlived experience. So he said, so is that a good answer? And Shirajul says, কৈফিয়তের মতো শোনালো আর কি, but it's just an excuse. So he's not very happy with this answer, of course. And then when he was signing the book, so Shirajul came up, to get a copy of the book, and it is revealed that he is signing the book with his right hand. So Shirajul asked, what happened to the leftist lefty? So he used to be a left-handed writer, so how come you have become a rightist? So again, so there are so many signifiers at work. So it's a very interesting book, very nuanced, because everything is telling you a story. So then Asimov says that there was an accident in which I lost my left arm. So, and of course he felt sorry for it. So this gives you this idea that there are clues, that are all very clear, that there seems to be no mystery where the story is heading. So one leftist has now become a rightist. And after the book launch, Asimova gives an interview to the book's translator, Elena Mojumdar, and he quotes Anupam Roy's popular song, Amake Amar Moto Thakte Dao. So, all those difficult questions were being asked, and he said, so Amake Amar Moto Thakte Dao, so just let it be, let me be myself. So to tell her that he has done with his political phase of being a charismatic political leader of the 1970s, he's rather happy to leave his past alone. He downplays his involvement with the Naxalite movement by saying, quote, at that time, everyone got a little involved. And then he did admit that his writings are autobiographical. As the cliche goes, to some extent, all writing is autobiographical. Right? So this is how the story moves on. And then the film goes on to introduce other characters, not in any particular order. So we get introduced to Indrani, a hyperactive woman, organizing all these events. So we are told that she is the second wife or current wife. She is an actress, a social worker, and for her social work, so she is assisted by someone called Janki, and Asimova uses his characteristic pun to call her the Woman Friday. So like Man Friday in Robinson Crusoe, so she's the Woman Friday. So it's interesting because she has a tribal feature, so you can get the racial undertone, that the kind of positioning that Asimova has done because of this Shautal girl, so, and she has been referred to, where did you find this, Woman Friday. So her tribal feature is telling of her Nagpur origin. She was taught at Jadavpur University and Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. And Janki is involved in theatre and takes interest in ethnic and folk art. And we also get to know about Indrani, that she has a daughter from her previous marriage who is simply referred to as Bully. And Bully is planning to get admission abroad. And we also get acquainted with Kunal, Indrani's friend and film director, who featured in a critically acclaimed film called Shiri. So these steps. Then we get introduced to another interesting character called Bulu. And Bulu is the caretaker of the house because Asimov lives in Oxford. So we are told that he used to be a distant relative because he calls Asimova as his uncle. Okay, and while they are away, so they use the property as a B&B, as a rest house, right? And Bulu has been involved in bringing in dodgy customers to this place. So that's why there's tension between the owner of the property and this caretaker. Asimova calls Bulu a bloody parasite. Then we get to know about Asimov's first wife, who is paralyzed, and together they had a son called Rick, who's a musician, and it is actually Rick who brought in Elena, the translator, so because they used to work together. So again, you have two wives, so one paralyzed and one very active, so that is going to be significant as the story progresses. And Asimova's westernized friend, Nikhilesh, so who is actually a painter and a curator. And during the book launch, Asimova was approached, for a write-up by a little magazine editor called Babel Bishas. So these are the, characters in the movie that we get to see. Now, what this movie, the technique of this movie that has been employed is meta-narrative, of course. So this is a film about film, so this is a writing about writing. We have already seen the play within a play and all that. So in Kolkata, Asimova starts working on a Bangla novel, right? So once he receives this copy of Meghnadbodh, so he starts writing a Bangla novel for a change, because he writes in English, but with his one hand, so he starts typing on a Bangla novel. And it now becomes clear that the first scene of the movie featuring the Swadeshi is actually a part of Asimov's work in progress. So the Birbhum episode that we saw is actually, a transliteration of Asimov's own writing. And he deliberately adopts a distant language and writes in the manner of Bankim in Shadhu Bangla or pure Bangla. Now the choice of language shows his intent of distancing himself from the action involving the peasant class, for which he got into an armed struggle. He created his fictional doppelganger, who told his political mentor that he had read about the Jacobins in Charles Dickens's novel. Alright, so in one of the episodes, so as a revolutionary, when he was having this conversation with his mentor, so he said that, have you heard about French Revolution, the Jacobins? So he said that, yes, I have read about it in Charles Dickens's novel. And his mentor got furious that, that's not history, So, and that makes Asimov, or the character in that novel, ask, aren't novels history? So, Upannash ki itihash noy. So, he echoes Georg Lucas's position as stated in historical novel to remind us that novel as a genre could be socially and politically critical as well as psychologically insightful, a position denounced by his comrades. Now we are brought back to the present, where we find Asimov with his family and friends in a small gathering celebrating his birthday. During the party, Indrani reveals that someone was bothering Asimov on Facebook under a fake ID called Vivishan. Once the party is over, the couple finds a copy of Meghnadbodh. So once again, this is the second time they receive a copy of Meghnadbodh, among the gifts. And it's a mystery, so who actually gifted that book. So because it's a small gathering and they know everyone. And the book has one line highlighted, right? So it says, to kill enemy, any means is justified. Now Asimov becomes visibly disturbed and rushes to, finish his novel, right? So he knew that, so somebody's after him. So the revenge plot thickens and he rushes to write down his Bangla novel. Now the polyphonic discourses are created through multiple voices. There is no central author scripting the text. The dead author Madhusudhan's epic is presented as highlighted excerpts only to serve as a threat message for a traitor. The threats were given earlier on Facebook. The fiction that Asimov is writing seems like a fringe narrative that tries to give his side of the story. So he's trying to tell his side of the story, right? So he's the traitor, but now, you're trying, getting the version that he wants to tell. All right. Now, just like in Hamlet, where everything happens twice, so Meghnadbodh Rohoshyo is also a movie where everything happens twice. Okay. So we have two wives, who have two children. So this is a post-nuclear family. So you don't have the traditional nucleus of father, mother, children. You have father, first wife, mother, second wife, another husband, and you have two children. So Rick's mom, so is old, almost Asimov's age, so mid-70s, but she is bound to a wheelchair. On the other hand, Bully's mom, Indrani, the actress, is relatively young, so there's visibly an age gap. And so she got her fame by acting in a film which is again significantly titled Shiri. So she has climbed up, the steps. Okay, there are two pimps. I'm saying pimps. Why? Because one is Nikhilesh, the art curator. So as the story progresses, we will get to know that he is actually an art smuggler. So he sells national property. So the idea of him being a painter, art curator, so that's simply a guise. But so he is basically an art smuggler. On the other hand, Bulu, so he rents out the place when Asimov's family is not there, so to prostitutes and others, So that's the whole idea that we have basically two pimps. Then of course there are two stories, so one story that involves Asimova, and the other story that Asimova is writing. So two stories are moving side by side. Okay, and so the one that he is writing involves how the Swadeshi activists got involved with the copy of the Das Kapital, and so coming out of Gandhi's Ahimsa, so they are moving into this idea of armed struggle and violence, as a way out. Okay, and there are two classes. Okay, so the first, is the upper class. So they are having this birthday party, drinking whiskey and all that. It's just almost like Midsummer Night's Dream. So you have bottom and the king and the queen. So the upper class, so they're drinking whiskeys, and the servants, so they steal some whiskey. So and then they are having a sub party, like so in the kitchen and all that. And so there is another attendant called Shambhu. So he got drunk, so, and he got sacked from the house and all that. So, and we get to know that, so this land in which this property is erected actually belonged to Bulu's parents. Right? So they allowed him to become a caretaker in that land. So the peasant, so how he becomes this landed class, and Bulu becomes the landless. So while drunk, so they revealed that narrative. And then we have these double locations. So as you have seen that it begins in England. So Asimova is a resident of Oxford, and when writing his confession, he says that I feel sorry for my friends. Yes, I have come here to find independence for myself, so I betrayed my friends, but I don't think my friends are free back home either. All right, so that's what he says. And so in India, so are they really free in an independent country? So he asked this question that, so are they really free back home? So that's what's up. Interestingly, so there are two Marx, and Kai sister mentioned Groucho Marx yesterday. So very interestingly, the Marx that Asimova has now or a poster that he has in his living room is that of Groucho Marx, the American comedian, with a Cuban cigar, in his lips. Okay, so. Again, so once this story upholds, so we realize that Asimova is a man who has betrayed his tribe. So his old comrades like Shirajul, and the one that he betrayed is called Indrajit, which happens to be the other name of Meghnadbodh, right? So they still have Marx in them, but our protagonist has embraced Groucho Marx as his new mentor. So for him, living abroad, so Marxism is nothing more than a fad, a romanticism that he espoused during his college days, and then so this is in his confession, so the writing that he's writing. So he says, we had united to break the shackles and now living in our own solitudes. So we are now all living in our bubbles. So yes, at one point of time we got united, but now so we live in our own solitudes. So we have the juxtaposition of high seriousness and then the trivial, and that creates a type of kish. So one very interesting joke that we hear. So when Asimova is disturbed after receiving this copy of this epic, so there is the news. So he goes for a morning walk, and there is this news of this, so Naxalites carrying out an attack on a police van, and 2 police officers got killed. So that was in the newspaper. And so the guy who had this newspaper, so he said, and he says, "Apni ki TV te koren?" And then he said, "Ami bashai kori." And so it's like so very crude humor. And so this guy got very offended, and he said, like, tutturi moshai. So he wanted to see the paper, and then he pulled his paper away and did not allow Asimova to read the details of the story. But so there's a bunch of old people, who were doing laughter therapy. And so suddenly, everybody erupted into laughter. So you have the joke going on, and then immediately, so at the backdrop, you get to hear, everybody laughing at Asimova. So we get to see that. All right, so moving on. So what we have, so from these dialectics of two, so we get to move to this idea of two scapes, So the first scape was in 1971, okay? So when this is, Asimova had, so actually he went on a self-imposed exile, but he disappeared. And after he vanishes, so the police started probing into his disappearance, and then we get to understand that, okay, so Asimova was actually the one who betrayed his comrade. He gave away information about his friend's hideout, and Indrajit is killed in police encounter, and Asimova earns his safe passage, so with the help of his father, who used to be a civil servant, and he went to England. So that's the first scape. And the second scape, of course, in 2016, where the story is located. So once he's confronted with his guilt, so he decides to withdraw all over again. Okay. This is where I need to show you this. Okay. Is it here? So this is the so this is the second scape. Okay, so this is in running. Okay,
আমি একটু কপি করে আনছি। তুমি কি বাথরুমে? কোথায় গেলে? অসীম, তুমি কি নিচে বেরিয়েছো? ঠিক আছে, কি হলো জানি। ছিল হাঁটতে, কিন্তু কিছুতে যেতে চাইতো না। আমরা টেলে টুলে পাঠাতাম। সম্প্রতি কারোর সঙ্গে কোনো তবে কেউ ভাইপোর জন্য ওরা কোথাও চলে যাবে।
What I'm trying to show is the Groucho Marx poster, and that suddenly gets blurred at the time of his disappearance. It moves so fast. suddenly, like, so you see that there's this Groucho Marx poster which has become blurred, and the phone is placed on a book. Again, so it's a mystery thriller called Love You to Death. So you have a phone, so Indrani is calling Oshim, so the phone has been left behind on a book called Love You to Death. So the plot becomes a mystery novel as police starts investigating the disappearance with a series of reference to Bangla detective novel tradition. The use of wit and humor by the detectives keeps on mitigating the tension, and new information about the other characters are revealed. We get to understand the homoerotic bond between Bulu and the other servant Shambhu, the affair between Elena and Rick, the illicit deal between Nikhilesh and an art smuggler. Kunal and Indrani's friendship seems pure as Kunal emerges as the narrator who is actually the filmmaker. With the disappearance of the author, Kunal has been born as a reader in search of the author. He reads Osimov's confession for clues and interviews several characters from the past, police officers involved in shooting those involved in Naxalbari movement, police officers who were sympathetic to Naxalbari causes, former comrades, and so on. Now eventually, the puzzle is solved, and we get to know that Osimov's comrade who was killed in police action was called Indrajit. His fiancée was a Shaukal girl, Shandhamoni, who gave birth to a girl after his death. The girl was later adopted by a couple, and she was given the best education. The girl is Janki or Janki. Okay, so again, so the name is very interesting. So right. Okay. So the name is, again a pun on the. Why did it happen? Okay. So again, it becomes a pun on Januki, right? So this Janki, Janaki, so goes back to this idea of who done it, why done it, and how done it. So what we have here, that Janki is the question that haunts the failed revolutionary movement. She just wants to know why her father was betrayed. So she was the one, so pursuing Asimova about the death of her father and sending all the books, and making sure that Asimova is forced to have that guilt trip. So, and this is the theme that links the movie to the classic text. So this, slaying of Meghnadbodh and slaying of Indrajit. And then what we have that, as Kunal says, while interviewing the police officers, that he's interested in making an objective film about the Naxalites without making any value judgment. The movie does the same. It leads to a powerful song to revisit some of the issues surrounding the Naxalbari movement. Right. So I will just go and play the song. And so Janki is confronted, and so she says that, okay, you do whatever you want to do, okay? And the film does not take any moral position. It simply ends with the song.
আরো একটা কোইন্সিডেন্স, ইন্দ্রজিৎ খুন হয় সোমু বহু ঠাকুর হাতে। ভালো নাম সৌমিত্র, লক্ষণের আরেক নাম সৌমিত্রী, সৌমিত্রার পুত্র বলে।
কিন্তু অসীম আর অশেষের নামের মানেটা যে এক, সেটা কিন্তু কোইন্সিডেন্স নয়। এখন আমি নিশ্চিত জানকী ফেক অ্যাকাউন্ট খুলে মেঘনাদ নামে ওই বিভীষণ নিয়ে লিখত অসীমের বলে।
একটা স্বার্থপরের মতো কথা মাথায় বলবো? অসীমবাবুর লেখাটা থেকে একটা দারুণ ভালো ছবি হতো, তবে আমি যদি সিনেমাটা বানাই তাহলে পেরিয়ে একটা 30-এর দশক হবে না, হবে 70-এর দশক।
So, as we heard yesterday, Marx was adopted and adapted to various historical conditions. The power of Marx lies in the changes that he became party to. In parts of India, which are closer to the Chinese border, Marxist-Leninist ideas got mixed up with Maoist rhetoric. Now, Charu Majumdar was the chief architect of the Naxalite movement in West Bengal and later to South India. As one of the characters in the movie says, Kerala and Kolkata share 3 M's. Movies, Marx, and March. Now, Naxalbari movement started as a class revolution directed against the landed and urban propertied classes. It attracted bright young students who felt that the time was ripe for a classless society. But the state diffused the tension with ruthless brutality. Asimova tells Janki that he gave away information about her father only to protect himself from third-degree torture that has crippled his left arm. He was promised that the police would not harm Indrajit. By the time Asimova too had become disillusioned by the prospect of Marxist-Maoist movement. The Naxalite is a movement that separated families, ripped societies open from inside. Satyajit Roy's The Adversary, for instance, pits one brother against the other. The older brother has sympathy for the Naxalite brother, but he realizes that the causes takes over the individual. The younger brother becomes insignificant as he becomes a mere agency of somebody else's instructions. He loses his identity in the process. Now, Naxalgia, of course, recurs in Bangla literature quite prominently, of course, so Hajar Churashi Ma is a classic example, and then you have Kalbala, so Animesh and others. But this question was actually addressed at Kolkata Lit Fest in 2016, where Shomresh, Shindu, and Kunal Bose, so 3 of them attended a session called Naxalgia. So I think, so this is a very interesting movie, and I'd like to wrap up. Of course, this song is very powerful and it sums it up so brilliantly. And the reason I shared this movie, because I'm not in a position to critically comment on this ideology, but I think that this is a movie that will open up the debate further, and it will, of course, rewrite the epic, so the high art, and then again, so it will bring in to the public discourses, an idea that we need to visit again and again within the rubric of English studies. Thank you.